This afternoon, we were pleased to present a $1,000 scholarship to Matthew Inman, a student at Harrison High School, and he was a very deserving student. And tonight we have one more to award, and that's to our own Andrew Bramlett.
Thank you very much.
You want some pictures?
Good. Help you on your way.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out on this rainy evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Tim Richardson. Matt Turner asked me to come and be the moderator of this panel tonight. We have three quite unruly people here, and somebody has to be big enough to keep them in line, so that's me. I want to recognize some of the people that are here tonight. First of all, the Save Acworth History Foundation board members. If y'all will stand up when I call your name. Matt Turner, President. Betsy Brown, Vice President. Louis Bramlett, Secretary. Becca Hilo, Treasurer. Yvonne Leander. Kurt Johnson, Alan Kemp, and their archivist, Andrew Bramlett. Thank y'all for putting on this forum tonight. Also in the audience tonight, we have Acworth Alderman Steve Prather. Say hello, Steve. I'd like to remind everyone that Save Acworth History Foundation is dependent on your support, and one way you can help is by buying a membership, and you can do that here tonight. Individual memberships are $15 or $25 for the family. Quite a bargain. That goes to help support Acworth history and preservation. The next big program coming up in the next month is a program about the history of Bethel AME Church, which is located directly behind us on School Street. And that's the presenter that evening will be Pastor Orna Husbands. That's going to be on May 14th at 7:00 p.m. So tonight we're going to go ahead and get started with the panel. This is just going to be a panel discussion. And at the end of the discussion, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. So you'll have be thinking of some good questions for these guys as we go through the process. Let me introduce everybody that's here tonight so that I'm sure you know them all, but I'll introduce them anyway. Just to my immediate right is Acworth Mayor Tommy Allegood. Glad to have you with us, Tommy. Longtime Acworth Alderman Butch Price, longest serving alderman in Acworth history. On the far right is, Mike Donahoo, former alderman and mayor. So we're going to get right to the questions. We're going to get right to the questions tonight. And we're going to start out finding out how each one of you gentlemen ended up in Acworth. One of you had no choice in being here, and the other two had choice in coming. So we're going to start with a person that had no choice in being in Acworth. Tell us about how your family came to be here. Mike?
Me, okay. Well, many years ago, like 1837, my great-great-great-grandfather wanted some land here in the city of Acworth. And he came over here, he and his wife, and they had 8 sons. And they built a house currently still being occupied by my son, Jeff, in the back. He and his wife and my grandson live on Collins Avenue. Over the years, one of his sons, my granddad, Ernest Collins, started a furniture and casket building business here on this side of the railroad track, which are later involved into J.F. Collins Furniture Store and Appliances. So my family, having settled here, my granddad and grandmother had owned a Collins Funeral Home and, as I said, Collins Furniture Store. They had 4 daughters. One was my mother, the youngest. Her name was Ernestine. There was Lola, Idell, and Mary Lynn. And Lola was the first woman licensed embalmer in the state of Georgia. So that's one of the things that they always said, she was the last to let you down, so. Over the years, College Funeral Home has been sold, and Chuck Johnson runs it, and it's still one of the oldest businesses in Cobb County, maintaining the college's name. My mother and dad, after the service, my dad came back to Acworth. He sold insurance for a little bit. Then he was offered a job at college. So ironic that mother and dad did own and operate College Furniture Store and sold it in 1975, I believe, to Tom Cable. So as they say, the rest is history. I don't know whether you want to go into our personal life at this time or not.
We'll wait on that.
Okay.
Somebody might be filming this, we have to be careful. Butch, tell us your story.
Well, I grew up was born and raised in the hill country over in Alabama. That's the reason Alabama has 3 or 4 different dialects, and I have the hill country dialect and can't get rid of it no matter how hard I try. But I grew up in a coal mining village, and you know, the company, Alabama Power Company, owned all the houses, much like the mill village in Acworth. And we were as poor as outhouse rats all of our life. We just survived, basically, is about what it was. And when I got out of high school, I went off to college, got a little scholarship to go down to Livingston State College. And when I graduated, I knew I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And so got to looking at how much the states paid. And I always assumed I'd probably settle somewhere around Birmingham because I had an uncle that lived there and I was very familiar with the town. But the state of Alabama paid $3,300 for a teacher, and Joe Hayes, of which if we follow this format, at some point I'll be able to tell you some stories about Joe Hayes. But he called Joe Carroll and me and asked us to come over, interview, and we found that Cobb County paid $43.97 per year. And that was $1,000 more than I could make in Alabama. Joe was a teacher also. So we came over, it was in the month of May, and I grew up on the Warrior River, so I was very familiar with fishing, running trot lines that belonged to other people. And I was familiar with skiing, that kind of stuff. And when I came across the little dam, at the little overlooked park, we stopped because we were a little early. And we got out and looked around. I said, you know, this is where I want to live, just because of the water and the way it looked at that time. I didn't know anything about the salaries at that point, but I made that decision right there. And sure enough, we've been here ever since.
How old were you?
22.
And what year did you graduate?
64.
Okay.
This is my 60th year.
50th reunion this summer.
All right, Tommy, how did you end up at Acworth?
Has he ever not been here?
Grew up in Sandy Springs, and in my adult life, I was in the building and building supply business in Cobb County, and lived in Marietta. And in 1992, Hurricane Andrew came and knocked down about 20,000 houses in South Florida. And I had a friend that was also in the supply business. We started at Lowe's together in 1972. And he said, all of our builders are going to South Florida, and let's go down and open up a building supply. And we did. We opened a building supply in Key Largo, and had some really great years. That's where I met Carol. And so we operated the building supply there, went on to be a contractor for the state of Florida, the Resolution Trust. Then my partner that I'd been in the building supply business with in Marietta, Lloyd Milholland, bought the Acme Building Supply. And he said, you know, I need some help. This is 1997. He says, Eddie and I need some help, and would you come back and help? And I said, yeah, Carol, we'll come back and do that. Carol and I were married at this point, and we found the old McMillan house, and I thought, well, we'll help Lloyd, we'll buy the house, we'll fix it up, it'll take 6 months, and we'll sell it. We're just not gonna be here very long. And so that's kind of the way the story went, except we stayed here a little longer than we thought. We're still here. We fixed up the house. We helped Lloyd with the building supply business. He sold the building supply business. We've continued to build houses and be involved with building here, and also wound up being a builder of community, helping to build Acworth and being part of a team that I'm so proud to have served with here in the city.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Let's go to some individual questions now. We'll come back to some others later. Mike,
Sorry.
tell us a bit about your military service.
When I graduated from high school, most everybody locally went to work at Lockheed to buy enough money to buy their first new car. Well, I was one of those. Went to work at Lockheed, loved working on airplanes, never thought when I was daydreaming in school I'd be working on airplanes. An opportunity came up for me to join the Air National Guard, Georgia Air National Guard at Dobbins. Well, I joined, and next thing you know, I went off to basic training, came back as a trained aircraft mechanic, working flight line. Of course, obviously I left Lockheed, went to work with the Georgia Air National Guard as a full-time technician. 32 years later, I finally retired. Simply for the fact of 1995, the government decided that it would be best if they moved our unit to Warner Robins. And I just felt like that that was a change. I went down there for 2 years. I enjoyed my work immensely. I enjoyed working on airplanes. You get to see your results basically when it takes off and if it comes back safely, you've done your job. I enjoyed that. After, in '97, when I retired, that was the end of my military career. So I certainly enjoyed the 32 years I did.
Thank you for your service, Mike. Okay, this question is going to be for everybody, and we're going to start with Butch this time. Tell us what impact public service has had on your life. What does it mean to you?
Well, I guess, you know, as an educator, you know, we dealt with the public. That was basically all it was. And to have the opportunity to work on like the city council or something like that was just an extension of what I was doing as a school teacher, coach, and principal eventually. And it gives you if you're a person like I am, a very shy, introverted type person, you may come across another way, as I heard somebody say one day. He didn't even wave at me, and I waved at him in the car, and I was just looking and focused ahead, and they kind of think you are stuck up, as the word is. And I was, I think that being in the public world, it gives you a lot of confidence as you deal with people. And my career in education, that one of the phases that I went through in education gave me quite a bit of confidence to deal with public and be able to speak and talk before the public and that kind of stuff.
So you spent your entire adult life in public service then, as an educator and then as an alderman?
Yes, sir.
Mike, what did public service mean to you?
Well, most people tell me I'm shy. I can't talk to people, so. I would have to say, first of all, I want to thank my son and his mom for being here tonight. Of course, he wasn't born when I was first elected, but I certainly appreciate the support of them being here tonight. And Sue was very, very helpful in supporting me and working during the campaigns. I guess you would say that I had the ability to have a granddaddy who was in the funeral business, never met a stranger. I don't mean this to sound the way it's going to come out, but my granddaddy could be crying with the people he just buried the body, but yet he could be over there with his arm around their shoulder telling them a joke. And that's the way my personality is. My granddaddy to me was the number one person. And my mother had his personality, and I've been told I have my mother's personality. Never met a stranger. Just is a people person. So I've got that characteristic. I have had the opportunity over my political career and military to meet some very, very important people. And that has stuck with me, that I get to talk with people that mean things to me. When we were going through the phases, which we'll get into, like Butch said, to talk about more personal things in our political life, you meet people and they say, oh, you're the mayor of Acworth, or you've done this and you've done that. Well, I bet that was interesting. Well, I think to myself, how do you tell somebody that it's interesting when you got challenges each and every day? There's not a day that went by that I think these three gentlemen can say that they don't have a challenge or a call. My personality has helped me get through a lot of things. And I felt like that if you ask people to vote for you, you've got to have yourself available 24/7. They realized that when they got elected, that you're out there, you're the public's eye. You've got to behold their trust. So I feel like that through my family, that was one of the reasons that I was able to meet people and greet people and hopefully make an impression.
Very good, thanks, Mike. Tommy, the same question to you. What has public service meant to you?
Well, I think we all would agree that we pass through seasons in our lives there, that as we're growing up, we're in young adulthood, we've got our children, we've got different jobs. So these are all seasons. And I would think about, for me, this season of serving on city council for 2 years and then as the mayor for 23 years, this season of my life, without a doubt, has been the most meaningful time and season in my life because of the opportunities that I have had to be able to see the generosity, the love, and the caring of people in this community, from the church groups, the volunteers at the churches, to Save the Acworth History Foundation. The generosity has just been extraordinary. To watch people love this community so much. Jimmy and Carolyn, I met you. You were the first people I met when we came here. Loving, caring, you've loved me. And so the impact for me has been being in this loving, caring community and being part of that. It's changed my life. It's changed my perspective. And I think God has used that in my life in a special way to give me a sense of how fortunate and grateful that I have had the opportunity to be in public service, to serve this community.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. Butch, a question for you. Not only were you a teacher when you came to Acworth, you also worked for the city of Acworth at one time. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, you know, as I quoted a while ago, the starting salary of a school teacher, I think my take-home check was $272 a month, and my wife's was $287 a month because I had the insurance cut out of mine, and so you kind of always look for a job in the summertime, you know, because school teachers were on 9-month contracts and we had a 3-month summer, and I hadn't started on graduate degrees early on in my life, so after I finished my first year of teaching, one of the fellows that was a classmate of mine at Livingston who had graduated a year earlier had come to Acworth, and I believe Betsy Brown and I agreed that he was the first recreation director for the city of Acworth. His name was Frank Brown, and that first summer after I finished teaching, I thought, you know, I knew Frank real well, so we'd spend a lot of time talking during the year, and he said, I'm gonna have a vacancy as an assistant director this summer. I said, would you be interested in doing that? And I said, yep, that's right up my alley. And so I was hired by the city of Acworth. So if Frank was the first full-time recreation director, I was the first full-time assistant director in the city of Acworth. And if I got my dates of who was mayor and so forth at the time, I think I was under the mayorship of Mary McCall. And then Betsy May can tell me exactly what year Frank decided he wanted to get out of the teaching world and go full-time into Parks and Recreation. I don't know whether that was his second year, third year, or fourth year being in Acworth. I can't remember that. But I do know that Frank quit teaching at Acworth School and became the full-time recreation director at Newnan, I believe was where he left and moved to. And I was promoted to the recreation directorship. And I do know that I was doing it in the year 1969 because I had written, Philip Roebuck was a city councilman for the city, and I guess he was probably the chair of the newly founded recreation department because I had written some letters to the Parks and Recreation boys that played softball, baseball, and all that. And they were leaving our parks at Coates and Clark and down at the Pop Willis Field. That was our two major fields. And they were leaving them in quite a mess. And I had sent a letter to the coaches, and I also sent a copy to the city. And about 4 or 5 years ago, Philip Roebuck, he still had these 2 or 3 letters, and he gave them to me, and I treasured them because that was some of my communication with them. So basically, Tim, I just, it was added income, and it was part of my growth into wanting to be a part of the city in another way.
Was that at the time when they had some of the attractions down at the beach, like the little railroad engine that used to go around down there? What was those things?
The track was still there when I was, the little train itself was. The little slide with the, what was it? Elephant slide was the major point. I think it was about that tall, maybe, but that was our major point down there. But recreation in our day was a little different from recreation today. A recreation department today deals with so much more than we did. Our major thing was in the wintertime, we had basketball. And in the summertime, we had Little League baseball, and we had the football stuff, and we dealt with all that. But one of the most interesting things about that was, all of you probably have kids that went through Cobb County schools, or you know a good bit about them, but you remember when the community school concept came in, probably in the mid-70s, maybe at that point. But the city of Acworth had the community school concept going when they created a recreation department, because, and by that I mean Joe Hayes, as principal of Acworth School, made the gym available to the Acworth Parks and Recreation Department for summertime play and nighttime play. So in the summertime, we opened the gym every day from like 8 o'clock in the morning till 12 in the day. Kids came from everywhere, and they played badminton, basketball. We closed the street off down the little hill there. We'd close it, and they would ride skateboards down that hill. And it was just, that was the first community school concept. So Acworth was doing it before it ever became a concept in the school systems across the country.
Thanks, Butch. Everybody I've ever talked to that has been involved in politics always has a story about the little spark. What is it that made you decide to first run for office? What encouraged you to step forward and do that? Tommy, you go first.
It was a spark. It was more than a spark, it's probably more of a flame. I was working with Lloyd up on at Acworth Building Supply. We wanted to buy a piece of property that was adjacent to the Acme property there, and it kind of went around and back, and it was owned residential. And so I said, oh, I didn't know much about the processes of buying and rezoning property, but so I started with filling out an application to rezone the property, and presented the application, and went before the board at the time. Butch and Tim were there, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I went back three different times. It kept getting tabled. And so I went back, and on the third time I came home and I was complaining to Carol, and she said, well, you're always the one that says, instead of being part of the problem, be part of the solution. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, they're qualifying, you can sign up and run for city council. I'd never, till she said it, I'd never really thought about it. I always, my feelings about people that were elected at that time was that they weren't honest, that people generally weren't honest, that they were all out to get something for themselves. That's all changed now. I don't think that anymore here at this level. But, so I went in the next day and signed up to run against Betsy Bean, who was serving at the time. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. There was somebody else was in the race too that I didn't even know was in the race. So once I entered the race, there were 3 people in the race, and that race went all the way through and went to a runoff, and I eked out in the end. But I can remember thinking, Steve Prather, about a month into this thing, how in the world? Why did I do this? I've made the biggest mistake of my life, because it was terrible. The person, Betsy, that I was with, just said some really disparaging things about me. I can't believe she would say that, but she did. And so anyway, that was. But the spark was trying to get the property rezoned, and it was a real hard process. I really thought there was a better way to do that, to be more friendly to people that wanted to invest in the community. And that really kind of began a philosophy that I've still used today, is making sure that we make it easy for people to come and invest in our city. These guys have certainly done that. Steve certainly understands that. And we have a council today that really understands economic development. They've done a great job. So
that would have been about 27 years ago. Do you remember how Butch and I voted on the rezoning?
Well, you didn't vote. In the end, it got tabled 3 times. I pulled the application. I pulled it. I said that we're not gonna do it. I actually had ridden up Main Street and saw Brian Bultice, the city manager, walking around on property. I said, "What are you doing out here?" This was like a month and a half into the process. He said, "Well, I was just looking to." I said, "You should have done this 6 weeks ago. You should have already helped to facilitate this." So it was never voted on. I pulled the application. So there you go.
You want us to bring it back up to the next meeting?
I'll let Steve Prather do that.
Tim, you remember though, we had made the decision that we needed to get rid of this gentleman. We didn't, so that's why we kept Taylor. We hoped he would.
We've been stuck with him ever since.
I didn't go away.
Butch, was it a spark or a flame that got you started?
It's kind of it fits into the personality, as I said a while ago. I never really felt like I was qualified to do what I thought was the upper level kind of things, like be a school principal or be a city councilman or anything. I never really, until as a city employee, I've witnessed the things that the mayor would do and the guys who worked on the, I guess at that time they were probably called the Public Works, I guess. And I saw some of the greatest guys in the Public Works era get criticized and chastised for things that I didn't feel like they deserved by someone at a different level. And I just kind of felt like that, you know, I said, you know, if he can do that, as I believe I could, and that's kind of triggered me to run. And it was the same way with when I wanted to become a school principal. I had gone through a different phase of my life and in education. I'll tell about it later, the opportunities there. But the job that I had forced me to go out into the schools and deal with school principals. And I'd go out there and, you know, and I'd witness what they were doing, and I'd say, if he can do this, I know good and well I can do it. So that's kind of just another way about sparked.
Great story. Mike, what got you started?
I still don't know to this day. Get a phone call from an individual who was serving on the council at that time. He had a son who was on the council, and he also had a son-in-law who was on the council. His name was Bud Blake. Called me one day, and of course I'd known Bud, and you know, you knew the mayor and city council, but you didn't really understand, didn't really have a lot of interest at that time. Well, he called me, asked could he come over to the house and talk to Sue and I. So I thought, okay, what have I done wrong? What do they want or whatever? So I said, yeah. So he came over and a couple of other guys, and of course, we sat in the living room and talked, and they said, we would like you to consider running for city council, or Alderman. And of course, I was just totally floored. First thing that popped into my mind, my mother and dad being in business, my aunt and uncle being in business, I thought, if I should run for re-election, and I wasn't going at this, once it came into my mind that, hey, if I can be asked to do it, then somebody maybe sees something that I can do or be a benefit. Well, after talking to mom and dad, they were encouraging, Lola and Hartley, they were encouraging about it. So that's what set in motion the fact that I'm going to run. I signed up, I ran. Running for politics back in '77 is so much different than it is today. You still got to get the people out to vote. You still got to make sure that you make contact with as many people as you can. Friend or foe, you hope that when you leave, after you talk to them. I never accepted one donation to run for politics. That was just the way that I was brought up. That was my style. This card right here was printed by Star Printing, Jim McElroy. Many of you remember Jim. I think we had 500 printed up the first time, and had to go back and have 5 more. Now, they're different colors. This wasn't the color that I chose for every one of them. You knock on doors, you ask the people to vote for you, tell them a little bit about you. If they're not at home, leave your name and number. And it worked. I didn't put up a yard sign. I despise yard signs. I'm sorry if y'all like them. I don't. I didn't put up a billboard. I didn't have television. I didn't do things like that. For a city alderman's position back then, you know, it's hard work to go door to door. And sure, my family was, I'm not going to say influential, but people today still talk about mother and dad. Oh, my grandmother bought furniture from y'all. Well, we still have a piece of furniture, and I thought, oh, we need that today. Well, the fact is that when these people remember you, they associate them with Collins Funeral Home, Collins Furniture Store, or Donahoo. So when you've done as much as you can do on elections or the night before election, you hope that you've done your best. Sue drove the car, got out, knocked on the doors, almost got the dog bit. We've been rejected from coming into people's yards. It's just a different life. But it's so much different now that you have to be, and Steve, my hat's off to you for running for politics now. But nowadays, I think it would just be so much more of a challenge than when I got into it. And I'll share, like we said again, I'll share a little bit more later on about the different individual things that we tried to accomplish. But I do not regret it one bit. I hope that what I did did and what the council and Alderman did. And the city staff, like Butch indicated, you got city staff here and workers that do not get anywhere near the praise for what they do for us.
So how many city workers do you think were on staff at the time you were first elected?
Oh, gosh. If I had a guess, I could be off 10, I'm gonna say probably 20, 25 people. I might be too high.
So it's grown
Oh,
20-fold
Yeah.
in the years since. Well, one of the things that was not available to your administration, Mike, was the special purpose local option sales tax lost. And that's something that Acworth has utilized greatly in the past few years. Tommy, tell us about how SPLOST has impacted Acworth.
Well, kind of give you a little refresher here. Right now, SPLOST is a consumption tax. It is the transportation project tax that we all share and pay. So we pay 4% of every dollar goes to the state, 1% goes to the Board of Education, 1% goes to SPLOST. And we're allowed to use those for certain projects. And the first SPLOST that was actually passed and implemented began in 1996. There's been 6 different SPLOST cycles that we collectively, the citizens, have all worked together to pass. And in each one of those SPLOST cycles, each city has to decide what the projects are going to be. We estimate what our part of the collection of the 1 penny is. We get a small part, and it has to do with our population and/or tax digest. So every city gets part of that 1 penny. And for us, that part of that 1 penny, since SPLOST started, has given us in total revenues about $155 million. So that is really where, when you see the projects, the real transformational projects and things that have happened, that's really where the money has come from to pay for that, the community center. In fact, if you look out the window here, everything that you see, all of this, most of what you see out the window today wasn't here 10 years ago. But all of this, these projects, have been paid for with SPLOST, plus many road projects, probably overall about 50% of those dollars that of our dollars that we've collected have been invested in road projects. The very first road project that was being done when I first got elected was called Old Cherokee Street right here. And that was a road project. See, right now today in our SPLOST projects, in our SPLOST cycle, we've got about $28 million worth of projects that we are working to complete. The original SPLOST, when I got elected, that was in place here, only had about $6 million of total projects. So it's really been a transformation to us again. And as we have grown, as our population has grown, so has our SPLOST dollar allocation. So every SPLOST cycle, it changes. So let me just make a comment. Right now, the county's talking about a 30-year mobility SPLOST. That is not the same thing as our 5 to 6 year SPLOST cycles that are allowed to use for either transportation projects or capital projects. Police station, city hall, community center, all of these projects paid for by SPLOST. It's been a really great thing. So continue to support that SPLOST. It'll be coming up in 2 years for renewal again. And we'll have an opportunity. We'll tell you what the projects are going to be. And with each project, because we always have been planning, so many times we would have, let's say we had 15 projects, but we only had the money for 10 projects. Well, those extra 5 projects that we couldn't do, they would go to the next SPLOST cycle. We were always planning the present SPLOST cycle plus 1 SPLOST cycle out. So we've always been planning in those projects and allocating those dollars for investment in our community.
And that's something that the public has input on.
You bet.
They get to come to meetings and tell us what they want.
You bet.
And then they have a chance to vote on it, whether they want
You bet.
To have the SPOS in place.
Yeah, and one other point is that on the SPOS, on the T-SPOS, which is this, right now we're in a 6-year cycle. So when this cycle ends, we'll have an opportunity to once again decide what projects. We still have some leftover projects from this cycle right here. They'll roll over, and every city, all 6, now 7 cities, all 7 cities have to agree on their projects and have to be in conjunction with agreement with the county. It's a lot of planning, so we all have to work together, the county and the cities, to be able to do it. It's a very, very complicated process. And then once we get that, we have to implement it. We've got to install and do exactly what we said we were going to do. We go right now, every quarter, James Albright goes to a meeting down at the county and has to answer for all the SPOS dollars that we're collecting and give a project update. It's a very complicated process.
And that's been a benefit to the city. But in your era as Mayor Mike, y'all didn't have that.
The only thing that we had was something called a LARP. It was a state project that you would have to put your request in. You were competing with 159 counties and cities throughout Georgia. They would evaluate what streets you needed paving. You might get half of Collins Avenue paved, you may not get the full street paved. So you had to really stay on top of where the money was at and hopefully how much you could get through your legislators.
And that's something that still exists today. It's not called.
Yeah, the streets still need paving.
Right, still have to pave the streets. So, other than that, what would you say during your administration as mayor? What's the biggest project y'all accomplished during that time?
I can't recall what the biggest project was. If I could just say, from my time of being elected official, we had issues with Georgia Power. We had an enormous Georgia Power bill. That was taken care of. I think you're still under MEAG now, is that correct?
Right.
Which is one of the best moves. We had a very small sewage treatment plant. With the growth that was anticipated, no way EPA was going to grant us a permit to expand that plant. That's when the decision was made that Cobb County bought the water and sewer rights to the city of Acworth and the surrounding areas that they served outside the city. So that was probably one of the features of why the growth has come to Cobb County, northern Cobb County. Your police department, with the growth, you had to expand that. Your city hall, you had to expand the number of people that work, because there were so many demands coming in that you had to get the right people to do the job.
Absolutely. Talking about the sale of the water and sewer system, the $3 million that y'all received from Cobb County is still in a trust fund to this day, earning interest for the citizens of Acworth.
I didn't realize that. Good man. Thank you.
Butch, let's go to a question for you. What was the best day you ever had as a teacher or principal?
I think it probably, let me say, as a teacher, it was probably my first or second year. I had some of these birds right out here in my first class. Alan and Kurt, some of those boys. But it was during the time of, you remember when the James Bond movies came out in the 60s, and I don't even remember what the first movie was, but I know I went to see it. And as the classes rotated through, we spent a day talking, reliving the James Bond movie, and that was quite an interesting and a fun thing. And as a principal, probably the better days came at the end of the year, when you could see the end of the year, and we would do what we called the Olympics. And we had the Olympics every year. And and I treated it just like it was the real thing, and the kids had such a real blast with it that it was so much fun. And the children that went through the school they loved the old school. The kids that all went through, and then, you know, when they closed the school down, it was interesting to see some of them made films of all the things that were going on, and I see some posts quite often today of reliving all of that. And but there are a lot of stressful things that happen in schoolwork, but there are also a lot of wonderful things that happen in schoolwork, and it was such a pleasure to be a part of it.
Tommy, back in 2010, the city of Acworth was designated as an All-American city. And now we're part of the All-American City Hall of Fame. Tell us how that came about.
We made an application to the National League of Cities to the All-American City application, and there's probably thousands of cities every year that make this application. And on this particular year in 2010, the application read that you had to submit and tell the National Civic League 3 life-changing programs that you had created in your community and something about the program. And so we had created 3 life-changing programs. One of them was building Horizon Field for the children with special needs in our community. We've got about 15,000 special needs, defined special needs children in Cobb County. So we built that field from the generosity of the citizens of many people in Acworth, and we developed this great program. We also developed two after-school programs. One was Acworth Achievers, to really minister to the children that lived in our public housing that was right here. And then we also created another program called the Horizon League to take children that were underserved in our elementary school and take them on special field trips. We had a benefactor at the time that gave us, that began to give us money for these children, for these 2 programs, the Acworth Achievers and the Horizon League children for the Horizon program to take children on field trips. And as he and his family began to give money, they've given $750,000 since these programs began. So we tell the National Civic League we've got these 3 programs, and they invite us to come. And part of what we had to do, Steve, as you recall, we decided we would take the children that were in these different programs with us, and we were going to be on stage. We had 6 or 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and we had to make a presentation to this panel of judges. And there were about 4,000 or 5,000 people sitting out in this big auditorium. So we took the kids and we allowed them to make a presentation, and they did such a wonderful job. And that night, when they awarded the All-American City, there were 25 cities chosen to come. We were awarded a unanimous decision and given the title of All-America City. So that would be my moment, my most unique moment of being the mayor. I was standing on stage, Butch was standing next to me, Steve Prather. We had children with us, we were all on stage, and really that was the moment that kind of validated that we were actually not only the All-America City, but we were the most loving, caring community in all of America. Because we would not have been there had it not been for the generosity and the gratitude of these people that had given so much to build a special needs field, $1.5 million, to invest in our children's program, $750,000, plus a lot of other donations along the way. So that really that was a defining moment about who we were as a city, what we were all about, and then to come back in 2020 and be inducted into the All-America City Hall of Fame. They wrote us a thing. We got this letter that says, tell us about these. Are you still doing the programs? Are these programs still there? We said, are they ever? So we wrote them back and told them that, and they inducted us into the All-America City Hall of Fame. So, yeah.
Great story. Mike, after your career with the Georgia Air National Guard, you went on to another career. Tell us about that.
Well, I stayed in politics, but it was on the other side. I was fortunate to be unemployed for 40 days. I made an application. I was called by the city manager at that time, the city of Marietta, to interview for an economic development job, and which was really surprising to me. Of course, I knew the city manager real well at that time. It was an individual who we had hired, or excuse me, who we had interviewed for the city manager job in Marietta. Acworth, I'm sorry, between Acworth and Marietta. And unfortunately, he didn't get it, but he got the job in Marietta, so I was real fortunate that he didn't hold any grudges. And I spent 15 years, thoroughly enjoyed that career. And again, when you work on one side of the political side of it, and then you're in the mainstream of seeing how things develop, working with developers and various groups, it's very rewarding. So I like to think that I've had two outstanding careers.
Were there any huge development projects that you were involved in Marietta that people here in Acworth can know about?
Probably not. Nobody cares now. Marietta was on the threshold of many things in regards to, here you have Atlanta, you have Smyrna, and you have Marietta and Acworth and working on up. And the way the pattern was being developed, Marietta was in the forefront because we had, like Acworth, you had accessibility. Most of what I dealt with and the team, we had a team because we had to add to it because there was talent in different departments that needed to be working with these various groups that came in. So as far as defining one project, I can't say. I mean, you can say some communities love to have Walmart, some don't. That was a big project that took, right, it's Big Chicken. That was a very big project that took a lot of wheeling and dealing. A lot of industries that expanded or wanted to come into Marietta, but they had existence already there, working with them. So it was just a good job. I enjoyed it, and hope that I contributed something.
That's great.
There.
Okay, this question is going to be for everybody on the panel. And we'll start with Butch on this one. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in Acworth in the past 30 years?
Well, when I came over here, Acworth was a thriving little town. It may, for you people who were born and raised here, it may have been considered very small to you. When I came here, Main Street was busy. We had our own grocery stores. We had our own clothing stores. We had our own hardware stores, and all of that. And I considered Acworth a big town because it was a big town compared to where I had lived. And so I saw the change then, Tim, go from a thriving community to one that just withered away because of the large box places and then the shopping centers that went up, like Town Center and Cobb Center and so forth, and people then had to leave Acworth to go buy groceries, and Acworth just died, basically. And then to see the revitalization was the biggest thrill.
And you played a big part in that revitalization process over the years.
You know, because it, early on, it was providing the necessities that we had to have, the kind of stores we had. And then when it when we go through a revitalization process, those kind of little businesses no longer can survive, even if they wanted to come back and survive. So we had to kind of bring things in that became a destination for people. It had to become some kind of shop that was something that people would come and go to, and of course a restaurant was one of those kind of things, and then you had other things that, and today, look at our main street, it's totally different from the main street of 40 or 50 or 60 years ago. And but yet, it is thriving like it did at that time, but just a totally different scenario.
And somebody that was here 60 or 100 years ago could have come back to town, and there would be things here that they would recognize that are still the same.
Yep.
Mike, what do you think are some of the biggest changes in the past 30 years?
I'll have to agree with what Butch said. Acworth went through a decline period because of 75, the other opportunities around. I had the opportunity to be over at the beach house the other day, and I cannot even think the number of people, when we were growing up, you used to have the sock hops, you had the beers things, when the beach was the beach. There's not a one in here, I would say, that has not attended some function at the beach. The beach house, I cannot imagine how many people were in that building on the night there was a band in there. Just overflowed, because it was the only place in town. We didn't have Six Flags, we didn't have the break, we didn't have the various entertainment centers. What inspired, I think, most people to come to Acworth was, it was in the country. It was literally in the country. And they felt like they were on a vacation or a mini trip. There were times when Acworth started being noticed. You would go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. Hello, I'm so-and-so, where are you from? Well, I'm from Acworth. Is that in Cherokee, Holland, or Bartow County? Oh, Acworth's in Cobb County. And some people still think that today. But since we just have the mobility opportunities, you can be I'm sorry to say this, traffic is terrible, but you could used to go to somewhere and be there quick, do your business, come home, and then have a good bit of time. I think one of the changes also is that the people, there's such a diverse group of people living in this community, in this area. And you have to adjust to what their needs are. I know you have different offerings, you have different churches to give opportunities for people to move into our area. That's good, that's an attraction. Having a quality city government, that's one of the basic things. Having safe Acworth history, that is very important. How many people would you think would fill this room if they had a connection like we do? And it makes me feel good to see the people that I grew up with making effort to try to restore and rekindle the interest for Acworth. The changes are going to come no matter what. They have to be prepared for any, y'all, I'm sorry. You are a moderator tonight, I'm not looking at you as a councilman. Y'all have to be prepared for any and everything. So my hat's off to you. We tried to meet the challenge, we met them the best we could with what we had to offer.
Tommy, the same question to you. What's some of the big changes you've seen since your time in Acworth?
Wow. Are you serving coffee?
Pardon?
I just wondered if you'd be serving coffee while you went through the litany of.
Well, I think as we get started, as the 21st century starts, that kind of marks the time that I'm really aware of what's going on. And we started at that point. We've got about 10,000 citizens. Our overall tax base, the tax digest, the total value of all of our real estate in our city is about $250 million. And today, we're at 24,000 people. And the value of all of the real estate, our total tax digest today is $1.1 billion. So in between those times, there has been a lot of things that are going on. And I think, kind of looking back, the vision that this board had to build what we call quality of life, to to make life better for our citizens and for all of our businesses, and have a sincere desire to make life better, is really what I think catapulted us and has created what I call a destination for us. A destination where people want to raise their families, where they want to come and retire, a destination where people want to invest in our community. Every place you look, we every Tuesday, we have businesses that come and they talk about investing in our community. We're full every Tuesday with people with business ideas wanting to invest in our community. Right now, as we speak, we have more people that want to move into the community and live in our city than we have places for them to live. So if you go back and you think about what all has happened, and we have become this destination, but this city council and the folks that on our city team and the folks that have just joined our city team understand that there's a real fine line with the growth that we've had. How do you manage the growth, and how do you not lose that hometown feeling, that quality of life, that feeling that you had when you grew up here? I wasn't here, but you were, and you're here tonight celebrating that. That's what you're doing. And how do you protect all that and make sure that we retain that hometown feeling that with all of the growth? Because we've had, we really, as we tell our story, we have people all the time asking us to, they want to come, they want us to tell them how we did it. And I always kind of start out saying that we're the city that started in last place, 21st century beginning, and wound up in first place when it comes to why do people want to live in our community. We're a destination, and we're generous, we're loving, we're caring. It's all of the things that we've talked about tonight that has made us this really special place that we call home.
And all of those things we've built on the people that have come before.
That's right.
Through Mike's era on the city council.
That's exactly right.
Going back to the turn of the century when the city council had the foresight to bring electricity and water and sewer to Acworth. That's all been built on. It's part of our history.
Can I add something to what you just said?
Yes.
And please, folks, understand that this is not directed towards any one individual. These 3 guys, 4 guys, they will tell you, you've got to have people with an open mind to listen. This gets people, the mouth gets people in more trouble on city council. You've got to have people that will have a vision. You've got to have people that work together. You can't go in with a closed mind on something that somebody told you about this business or this development. You've got, and it takes several elections to get those people in place. I was fortunate to have an administration that I felt like the people work together. When you have a project and you get a unanimous vote, that's the best feeling in the world when you're in politics. Now that may not be the best thing in politics, but when you listen and you wrap that gavel, all 4, everybody votes, that's good. It takes a team. So if you ever have thoughts about getting in politics, talk to people. It's rewarding. It's also can be frustrating. So thank you for letting me put that in.
Thank you, Mike. I promised we'd have some time for questions from the audience. So if anybody has some questions, raise your hand and we'll recognize you and you can ask your question. Yes, Jim.
Being a citizen of the Acworth community, not just the town of Acworth for 84 years, I have fond memories of the time when we would come to town and bring our groceries to swap for coffee and sugar and cookies. But go outside. One thing that I would be interested to know, were any of you on the council at the time that decided to move the street over and take the buildings out? None of you were on that at that time. That was a time.
It's 1982.
Yeah, that was a challenging time for the city to make that decision.
That would have been at the time for the parking lot we see here on the screen that was built.
Of course, there's a story behind that too. The owner of that property, I understand, got real angry with the city and painted all the buildings pink. And that was, I think, was the encouragement to take those buildings.
Oh, goodness.
The one memory I have there is there was a jewelry store. You may remember it. Smith, Little Smith. I sold a cow. Bought my wife's engagement ring. 67 years ago.
Oh, my goodness.
Another thing I'd like to ask Tommy about, because he was instrumental in this, how challenging was it to make the decision to develop the property on 41 where the old motel was? Kind of talk a little bit about that, you know, really.
Which piece of property?
Where Target is.
Oh, well, that, before the Target, everybody will remember there was a landfill, and it was a licensed landfill. Had a license given to them by the state of Georgia to fill organic materials. You could put anything organic that was going to break down, and it's 25 acres. And the owner, at the time, I can remember one of the first things I did after my first or second day as being mayor, I called him up and I said, literally, I said, so economic development, have you ever thought about selling your business out there? We'll help you sell it. And he said, no, we're not going to do it. And I called the guy that owned Modern Living and asked him, had the same question for him. And so that at the time was being operated as a landfill. And Becky Denlinger, who was and it's getting filled up. In 2004 or 5, I mean, it was getting almost filled up. Of course, he had the flea market there. And as the flea market brought all kinds of different trouble. I mean, it was every bad thing that you can imagine was going on there at the flea market. So not only environmentally did we have some real issues with what they had covered up, but what was also going on there every Saturday and Sunday. So I called, I'd made friends with the fire chief, Becky Denlinger, and I said, you know, people are talking about they smell things out there, and I said, I want you to go out next week, send somebody out there with the Geiger counter that smells methane gas or whatever. She calls and she says, sure enough, there's methane gas everywhere. It was seeping up. It was seeping up through the dirt. And she says, I'm shutting this place down. And they pulled big yellow caution tape out there, shut it down. We had somebody at the time, North American Properties, that wanted to buy the property, and the property owner would not deal with them. He kind of blew them off. So when Becky put up the yellow tape, he's calling me. He hadn't taken my call in a couple of years. He's calling me and says, who's that guy at North American Property? And I said, well, it's Mark Torrey. Well, goes on to make the deal, and Target had built another Target store up in Minneapolis on a landfill. They knew how to do it, and we helped them with the tax allocation district, helped them with a special incentive to drive metal, 100-foot long metal pilings in the ground, and they put them every 10 foot like this on that whole. There's like 150 pilings out there. And they built that Target store on top of a landfill, vented the methane gas up through the Target roof, because at some point they knew it would burn out, and it did. And then they built the parking lot. All of that was built on top of the landfill. They had done it in Minneapolis. So, and the Target, that whole development goes on to be the commercial catalyst for everything out on. Then every national retailer in the nation came because of that. But it was that catalyst. And Becky Denlinger pulling out that yellow caution tape out there and shutting that guy down. Oh, so he closed us on the property. I can't remember his name. Closes on the property. Do you remember? He closed us on the property. He was a mean old cuss. He closed us on the property, sold the property for like $12 million, and 2 days later he fell dead. Never got to spend the money.
Wow. That methane gas will get you on it.
Methane gas. So there you go.
And that goes, that's a success story that goes back building on future, or past generations, because at some point, somebody annexed that property into the city. Was that in the city when you were Mayor Mike? So sometime after your administration, somebody annexed that into the city. And now today, because of that, we have the commercial district that we have on 40.
Overall, talking about annexation, we've annexed overall through all the years, about 1,350 acres, total acres into the city that were once in the county or Corps of Engineer property. We've annexed all that. And that's where a lot of the growth out on 41's come from.
One quick question to Butch. What effect do you think that movement affected the downtown Acworth negatively? The movement to 41 to the top. How did that affect downtown Acworth?
The big box stores and things that went up out there replaced our little local hardware stores and clothing stores and the malls and that kind of stuff down 40 to 4 lane. It was the reason that our businesses had to close. They couldn't survive.
Okay, we've got time for some more questions. Do we have anybody else with some questions? Okay.
Tim, let me say one thing before we knock off. When you have a city council, in order to be successful, as Mike stated, it doesn't just happen in a one election cycle. And you have people with different strengths upon the city council, and you have to utilize the strength of those persons. Not everybody on the council that I served on, and with Tim and Tommy, not everyone. I was not a visionist. We had a couple of people on the council who were visionists, and we listened to them. My strength on the council, I always felt like my strength was I served on most of the committees where we interviewed and hired people. And I always felt like that I could read a person pretty good, having been in the school business and hiring teachers every year, because it was so important to have the right kind of teacher in the right setting, or they could not be successful. And so my strength, my contribution centered on the personnel department mostly throughout mine, and I depended on somebody else to tell me what they projected out front that I couldn't see, and then they would tell me why, and that would influence my vote on things. So, and we have been very fortunate to have a city council. If you take the Marietta Journal, you know what goes on in the other cities in Cobb County. It's a lot of bickering and fussing and carrying on. It's always negative things. Rarely did you see that with our council, because we work behind the scenes to iron our differences out. And then we went before the public, we looked pretty good, but it took work. And you depend upon the strengths of each person and utilize those strengths.
Mike, did you want to close with anything?
Yeah, if we're about ready to wrap this up, not that we have to, but I just wanted to add a little bit of lightness to the meeting tonight. I'm probably, I can't verify this, probably one of the first elected officials in the city of Acworth that was sworn in Kennestone Hospital. At that time, I was an aircraft mechanic. I thought I knew everything. I thought I could fix everything. Sue was pregnant at that time with her son, and I thought, well, we don't have a garage door opener, so I think I'll put up with the garage door opener. So I was off during a couple of days or weeks and stuff for Christmas, and I went to see her, bought a garage door opener, looked at the instructions. Okay, like everybody else, you put them aside. Well, I was doing a great job. And I got over the cable here and I unloosened this boat, and next thing I know, I was flat on my back. The cable came loose and caught me right across the face. Well, I had to make my way over to my neighbor, Barfield, and when his wife answered the door, she said, "Oh my God." I knew it was kind of bad. So, I have a picture of me being sworn in Kempstone Hospital. So I hold that treasure right there. And these guys will tell you that anything you can do to get a vote, you will do it. Now, this is what I dressed up as one time. So Easter, you gotta let the people know you care about the community. So, and quickly, this book here, 1974, it gives a great breakdown of what was challenges at that time for the future. And it's surprising that many of the items in here that were discussed, recommended, have been done today. So these things work, they're costly, but back in '74, it is now used as a blueprint for what's happening today. And I have a couple of articles up here for people who might want to come see some of the things that go way back. So please feel free once we're dismissed. Thank y'all for being here, I really appreciate it.
Anything else from you, Butch? Any closing comments? Not really. Tommy, anything from you? Well, I'd like to thank Mayor Mike Donahoo, Alderman Butch Price, and Mayor Tommy Allegood for being here tonight. Let's give them a big round.